Welcome everybody. It is Business Monday here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, located in downtown Providence, right on Wade Bossett Street, under the gleaming shadow of the Superman building. And I'm Josh Fenton. This guy's Gary Sass, the money man. Cha-ching. Everything is going on, Gary Sass. Literally everything. Let's start in Washington, D.C. You're friends with U.S. senators. You hang out with them. One of them's a fancy Republican, right? A couple of them. Kavanaugh is in a little hot water tied to allegations that while a high school student, he sexually molested a fellow student. He was 17, she was 15. She came forward. She's a professor out on the West Coast. What's your take on the allegations?
Well, the allegations are serious, and they should be taken seriously. Women don't come out and say those things unless there's maybe something there. I think it's a little unfortunate it didn't come out sooner, since the people had the allegations several months ago, and so that raises suspicion. I think everyone should keep their powder dry. I think the Senate and Senator Grassley, who's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is going to handle it well, has been handling it well, give the women a chance to come in and testify before the Senate, give Judge Kavanaugh the same opportunity, and see where it goes. That's all you can do. You can't say someone's guilty until it's proven, but you can't dismiss the allegations very lightly. So there's a process, and it has to go through the process, and hopefully the truth will come out.
So it's a different era than when Judge Clarence Thomas had allegations made against him that, for the most part, I think in many ways have been proven to be maybe true. And that captured the whole country. People literally stopped what they were doing and watched those hearings amongst the Senate Judiciary. Is this going to have the same impact? Are we going to sort of stop what we're doing and tune in to see what's going on at Senate Judiciary and see this allegation and then the response from it?
Well, yes, I think there'll be a lot of interest, but one thing is very different now than when the Justice Thomas thing came up. I remember being up in Maine, turning on the television and getting a screechy, picture of the hearings.
Right.
Here, people, since the advent of Trump, have been listening to cable news 24/7.
Right.
So it's just another soap opera on cable news. But you say things changed since Justice Thomas. They changed a lot since Bill Clinton was catting around the White House.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that some of the groups that have been most critical of Justice Kavanaugh, or the allegations against Justice Kavanaugh, have been some of the same groups that thought what Bill Clinton did was perfectly okay, and he was in the White House.
Is it also, this morning, as the professor who has made the allegations was making the announcement, I think it was around the 7:30 hour, 7:30 mark this morning, that she was willing to go and testify on Capitol Hill. Her attorney, I think it's Katz, was on CNN. A number of CNN analysts raised the question of, do we count everything that takes place in high school as a disqualifier of a career at the highest levels? Or is it that, or is it the fact that it's being blown up and exposed? What are the rules now?
Well, the rules are very unclear, but one rule we do know is that as part of the Me Too movement, you have to give an extra mile to the woman who's bringing the charges. So that's part of it. I think most of us who are interested in a higher position would not like people to go back and look at. I wouldn't want you to look at my high school transcript, let alone look at my activities. So it's a tough question. So I don't have an answer to it, but the facts are that the allegations have been made, that the climate has changed considerably since Bill Clinton was in the White House. I think the leadership in the Senate is handling it as best they can by saying these are serious allegations and we have to go through and spend maybe an extra day or an extra week, hearing from both sides and making a decision. Then it gets down to a question of what your personal views and what the orientation is towards something you did when you were 17 years old versus what you've done at 57. Interesting thing, too, about Justice Kavanaugh, which makes me a little suspicious, he's been through FBI clearance several times.
Yeah.
On a White House job, on jobs to appointment to high levels on the bench. Somebody told me, I think, that there were over 100 women who were character witnesses or witnesses for his capabilities to be a judge. So let the truth come out. We have to go forward. You can't, in this day and age, say, well, it came in late, it looks peculiar. There's a moral relevancy between what you did when you were 17 versus what you do when you're 57, and there is. But that's not an excuse anymore. So you have to let the process go forward.
Any prediction? There's 3 swing Republicans, it looks like. Flake, who's on Senate Judiciary, who's a moderate Republican and a very significant critic of the Trump administration. He is not running for re-election, so he wouldn't face any backlash. The other 2 are women senators, Murkowski from Alaska and Susan Collins from Maine. Susan Collins is in that sort of John Chafee mode, moderate New England Republican. Do any of them sway, and it just takes one of them to go south on the president?
Well, there's an old country song, "Pick Me Up on Your Way Down."
Yeah.
And the way Trump has treated people, he saw it with McCain. I think he's seeing it with Flake. I think the most vulnerable place is on the Judiciary Committee, not necessarily for the full Senate, and just Senator Flake's on the Judiciary Committee. So I let the better angels, govern. I think people are going to keep an open mind. Look at the facts, look at the circumstances in which the facts came out. Look at some of the other evidence that has been submitted, particularly FBI clearances on a number of high-level positions. I do have confidence in the FBI, and the decision will be made. But to sit here and second-guess what other people are going to do from a practical political consideration, you could not get away without having the process go forward, and so that's what's going to happen.
Switch subjects a little bit. National debt. People are starting to realize that some of the spending spree and tax cut impacts are making the economy maybe a little more complex, especially in the long term, as the debt numbers are coming in and they are far in excess of what was anticipated, and at all-time record levels. Your thoughts?
It's horrible. I mean, this is not your father's Republican Party anymore. This is unconscionable. Just think of the...
There's no Graham and no Rudman in this party, right?
Well, there's Lindsey Graham, but I don't know what he understands about finances. Yeah, there's no Graham, there's no Rudman, there's no values. We have a president that has been through bankruptcy several times. It's a way of life to him. So I'm not sure how concerned he is about the national, debt. We have a Secretary of the Treasury who haven't heard from recently.
No.
He's certainly not the most qualified person to ever, most experienced. Let me take that back.
Yeah.
Most experienced, person to fill that position. But you can't keep on going like this, because what happens is the debt will be bought up by foreign countries, namely China and others. We're trying to renegotiate trade agreements. Even if the president's right, I think he has some merit in trying to renegotiate the trade agreement with China. How the hell do you do it if they're buying up all your debt?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it is some of the worst, public policy. I think we also have to recognize that it's not only driven by the tax cuts, it's driven more by the gridlock that exists in Washington. It's very soon, I won't talk about it today, but I've become part of a group called No Labels, which is working for ways to break the gridlock in Congress to more bipartisanship and less hyper-partisanship. And I think that's a big part of the solution, because it's so hard to pass a budget. There are 2 ways that an amendment or a bill can hit the floor in Congress, either by a closed rule or by an open rule. A closed rule, you don't have amendments, so the leadership controls all the bills on closed rules, and so you get these crazy, budget deals at the end without going through an open, process of discussing it. So it's bad for the economy, it's bad for trade, it's bad for the future of jobs, it's bad for the future of investment. There's always going to be debt. I'm not one of those purists that say you can't have debt. There are times that you should have debt, but you have to have reasonable bounds, and we have exceeded those, in my opinion.
And we've got high debt, just to leave it a last thought, we've got high debt at a time of significant growth. What happens when the economy changes? Then we've got debt on top of debt if we're trying to use some of those stimulus, traditional stimulus tools to be able to jumpstart the economy.
And just think of what the Fed has to do right now to make sure that we don't go into an inflationary cycle by dealing with interest rates.
Right.
So each time the prime rate is increased, the federal spending gets higher because the service on the debt increases. You know, we're really in the classic, catch-22, and it really is, I think, because of the lack of, fiscal, leadership by everybody. It's not a Republican.
I think it's a catch-22 trillion based on the debt numbers that are coming through.
Almost per day, per month as it goes up each month. And that's really a Democrat and Republican. Democrats are fine saying, well, you can't touch entitlement programs, and the Republicans are fine saying we have to cut taxes, stimulate business. Right. We can't do both.
Right.
And most of the debt, this is interesting, the debt was at 10 trillion. The tax cut added another trillion to it, making it 11 trillion. But these numbers are far in excess of
Absolutely.
what was added to the debt by the tax cut. It's runaway spending. It's a lack of control of spending.
Let's jump back to Rhode Island. Last Wednesday was primary day. Gina Raimondo had a solid win, 57% of the vote, 43% for Spencer Dickinson and Matt Brown. Is that a mandate for Gina Raimondo to go forward into the general election?
Well, I don't think primaries are mandates these days because about 20% of the eligible people voted in primaries.
Yeah.
But it really was it was like a Broadway play, breaking out the show in New Haven or Hartford or Providence somewhere. It was a very good dress rehearsal for the election.
Yeah.
So it was good practice. And when you look at what the results were, the governor is in a very, very strong position to be reelected. She's clearly the odds-on favorite. And if you start to look at some factors, some practical and some political and some economic, the amount of money she's raised was intelligently used for get out the vote efforts, organization, which is really what the advantage you have for money. It's not for advertising on television and getting your message out, is to get the vote out.
Yeah.
And so they had an unbelievably strong, get out the vote, campaign. And if the election was close, certainly it affects, a few percentage points. She was lucky that McKee was reelected governor, because if Regenberg was reelected governor, I think the Funk people, if they had any smarts, would have clearly made him the poster child for, one heartbeat away as somebody who's going to, raise your taxes and is a socialist. So, some of the dumbest politics were by some of my conservative friends who said we needed to defeat Regenberg. No, if you're a Republican and conservative, you want him on the ticket, and so. But she got a break. And it was all part of the Democratic establishment. I think another thing that was very impressive about this election, from the Democrat point of view, was the establishment came together. The mayors and the leadership. She's lucky she has Trillo on the ticket. Now Trillo, we don't know what kind of factor he's going to be, and so if Joe gets 5% of the vote, he's not going to be much of a factor. If he gets 10% of the vote,
I think he's more 10% of the vote.
Well, if he gets 10% of the vote, he's really a strong factor in terms of political organization. Gina may not advertise herself as a Sanders progressive, but she has very strong backing in the women's group community, but a lot of progressive organizations that have backed progressive candidates elsewhere. There's the Trump blowback, 36% approval rating in the Northeast, and it's going to be a short campaign. And she has money. Now, we've criticized Gina. There have been pluses and minuses that have come out of her administration, but she has a hell of a lot of money to explain the pluses.
Anything she wants to.
And not focus so much on the negative parts. So when you put all that together, I've just gone through a litany of 7 or 8 things in a minute or two. The challenger has really a steep mountain to climb, and add one other factor to it, which I think sometimes is overlooked in the state, or maybe it's not, maybe it's by design. There's about 5 or 6 weeks till the general election.
7 weeks.
7 weeks.
Yeah.
So in less than 2 months, if you're an incumbent and you have the advantages, if I'm right, if you have the advantages that I've just gone through, overcoming those advantages in a 7-week period is a very difficult thing to do.
Well, let me play devil's advocate just for purposes of
being a devil.
Being the devil. Alan Fung beat back a far superior candidate in Patricia Morgan, a House Minority Leader, better known, bigger track record, actually had lived in Rhode Island in the past decade versus Matt Brown. He beat her by roughly the same percentage point, came out with, I think, 56,
40
57.
Versus 35,
yeah, versus 40 versus 3 for Giovanni Ferrosi. In addition, he avoided, despite being caught in a Trump hat, he avoided having to pivot hard right during the primary and being caught in defending Trump during the primary campaign, and in fact, on primary day, probably gave his best explanation of his evaluation of Trump. And he said, "Listen, I'm a Charlie Baker Republican. I'm about getting things done. I'm not into these ideological things. And President Trump's done a good job on the economy." Let me add one more. Gina Raimondo has never, in a public opinion poll by anyone, had an approval rating over 50%.
Okay, now let me go back one by one. And they're good points. That's why we're going to have the election, because it's not over until you play the game. First point, Matt Brown had been out of the state for a number of years. Pat Morgan was active in the state.
Very active.
She was minority leader. She was outspoken.
Feisty. She's a feisty candidate.
And she had a base of support in the Republican Party. Republican Party also had a contentious gubernatorial primary 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
And so there's this factionalism there, which didn't necessarily exist in the Democratic Party to the same degree. Charlie Baker would never have gone to the inauguration, which he did, and get himself photographed in a Trump hat.
He would not.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
If you're going to play the game and play long ball, I don't think so. So it's symbolic things like that make a difference. Pat ran on issues. She had definite points of view. One of the criticisms of the Fung campaign, it wasn't clear. And you say he's not a Trump person. He spent a lot of time in the campaign talking about the ACLU
yeah.
and crime. So that sounded a little bit Trumpian to me. I don't know how you interpreted it, but said I am a conservative. I am a Republican. I hope he does well. But everything just being objective and going through all these facts and the environment that exists on the ground, this is going to be a tough hoe.
Let's just say, one other. I'll add one other. The first day after the primary, literally on Thursday, the Raimondo campaign broke a TV commercial. They've got $8 million. They're using one of the top Democratic creative agencies in the country, and they couldn't get the locations right on the attack ad. Is that just petty picking, or is that just another indication of these lack of attention to the Raimondo administration, whether it's Iceland or following the federal warning about UHIP or some of these things, that there's a little bit of a pattern?
Back in the country, we call it arrogance.
Yeah.
You have to pay. If you take care of the small things, big things don't become problems. So there will be mistakes. You have mistakes in UIP, you have mistakes in Cooler and Warmer, you had mistakes at DCYF. There's no shortage of mistakes. So we'll see what happens. But with the scenario that I've just described, she has more room to make mistakes than he does.
I think that's true. Anything else you saw coming out of the primaries that were aha moments. Why would anyone fight to be lieutenant governor? I think you could make a firm assumption that if you win lieutenant governor, you have lost the race. If you lost the race, you've won the race, because you don't have to be lieutenant governor for 4 years.
Well, it's like somebody...
Arbor Day is your biggest day of the year because you go to 4 elementary schools and plant trees. I believe that's your #1 highest, busiest day as lieutenant governor of Rhode Island.
It's like when you got married. Your spouse, promised to honor and obey. Honor whatever it goes, the vow, but not to have lunch on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So everybody has to be somewhere. No, in a serious sense, I think people running for lieutenant governor because of public service, and I'm not a cynic. I think there are people that truly believe they can.
Do they think it's a stepping stone? Because the last time a lieutenant governor became governor, I believe, was Joe Garrahy.
That's correct.
Was that in 1852, just after the Magna Carta?
1876. But no, that's true. I don't know what they dream about at night. It's certainly a possibility. But I think you feel that you can make a difference. And we've had lieutenant governors that have just showed up to take the check, and we've had lieutenant governors that have, worked on things. I think it's one of the unfortunate things about Rhode Island politics is that governors have always underutilized lieutenant governors. I won't do it here, but I can tell you a lot of stories about the relationship when I was in government. The relationship between Sumlin and Roger Bejan was an interesting one.
They hate them. They always hate them.
Well, they don't want anybody else to get. They're just fighting to get time, space.
And at least the lieutenant governor back in the olden day was the president of the Senate, oversaw the Senate. If there was a tie vote, they broke the tie. But that was changed in the state constitution, and now are they even allowed to go in the State House? Can a lieutenant governor even go in the building unless they're on a tour with the school?
Well, they have an office, and it's on the first floor, and they're not in the basement. But I think it's public service. I think you identify a couple of things you want to draw attention to. I think there's also some upward career mobility, a combination of factors that's complex.
It is absolutely career mobility. If you want to go from public service into the private sector, you become lieutenant governor, because Roger Bejan's over at Mellon Bank and Bernie Jack Voney's down at the law firm over in North Providence or something.
It depends upon the age you get elected to serve as lieutenant governor. But no, I didn't see anything really unusual up there from the campaign. In some ways, I would define it in 2 respects. It was pretty much a status quo campaign. I didn't see...
Across the board.
Across the board. I didn't see people of, say we have to change, throw the rascals out. And on the other hand, I saw the progressives really make some progress, apparently made progress in urban areas where you think they would. And that's probably a good thing, because the Democratic Party now is becoming more reflective of their base. But they didn't have enough gain to change it's not a game changer, but there'll be 5 or 6 people that have more progressive bent up there who were probably a little more representative of the urban communities. So that was a modest change. There wasn't much to change, because except for the primary for lieutenant governor and primary for governor, there wasn't very many contested seats except for some legislative seats. So we'll see if it was a status quo election in 7 weeks.
I think the biggest takeaway from any kind of trend you look at was women. Women generally beat men in mostly contested races. In Providence now you have 8 members of the city council who are women. That's a first to even get that close. I think the high before was 4 or 5. So a little bit of assertion of muscle in that standpoint. But that was really the only significant change you saw.
Well, there was one other significant, one change. It's been coming for a long time, and some of it's the women factor. It is hard as hell to get people who want to run for office these days.
Oh, absolutely.
And just with what you have to go through in terms of, raising money, working with leadership groups, having your integrity questioned if people disagree with you on substance. And that's a problem not just here, but it's an issue that's faced all over.
Last but not least, do we want to talk some ACC football? No discussion of ACC football this week on GoLocal Live by the Money Man. Former wide
No, no,
receiver
no.
for Florida
So
State.
let me
Is
tell
that-
let me tell
is
you,
that-
the
is that- is
school,
that-
we have a strategic policy at the school.
and at the
No,
Hasselfeld Institute?
Well, yeah, they got it from the Hasselfeld Institute. We wanted our academics ranked higher than our football team, and we've just about made it.
That's great. Next week, I think we will see more intensity out of the Mattiello Frias race over the next couple weeks. I look forward to having you back.
How do you
And
see that?
I think it's a race. You know, I think it was 85 votes last time. You can argue that the speaker gets two advantages this time. First of all, there's not the Trump vote. And second of all, he did eliminate the car tax. So those are on the plus side. On the negative side, he's got a problem with Frank Montanaro. And for any speaker, it's 2 years later. And people get, you know, less excited about speakers as their careers go along. I think that's the complexity. I have him here tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Any questions I need to ask him?
No, but I think I'd drive through the district and look at the yard signs, so you have some really unique configurations.
It is amazing. I was there Saturday night for dinner seeing a friend, and you see Gina and Frias and Fung and Mattiello.
Yeah, that's
and,
not, I know some of those.
Yeah.
So it's too screwy to call.
As always, the money man, Gary Sass from the Hasselfeld Institute. Great insights both down in D.C. as well as up here in Rhode Island. We're going to take about a 30-second break. Just cut the sound. We're going to come right back, move some chairs, and we'll be back with Neil Steinberg from the Rhode Island Foundation. Hold on 1 second here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. It is Business Monday. We are here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I am Josh Fenton. He is Neil Steinberg. He is the head of the Rhode Island Foundation. I just, a little tiny block here on the corner of downtown Providence. I only control maybe one or two of these little carpet squares. He controls philanthropy in Rhode Island. You just went through a huge process, many, many months. I think the number was 1,300
yeah.
pounds of ziti handed out
right.
to coax Rhode Islanders
Right.
in to have a discussion about Rhode Island and what the future of Rhode Island is. The initiative is called
Together
Rhode
RI. Yep.
And talk a little bit about it. You went all over the state. You
Right.
did about 60 to 100 people at each of these things. Talk about what the experience was.
Sure. So first, we also had 2,300 meatballs too, just to round it out. Yeah, that
2,300
we
meatballs.
consumed, and you know, we joke about it, but that was a big part of the effort and the event. So we did from the end of March until early May. Over 6 weeks, we went to 20 locations around the state. Usually weeknights, a couple of Saturday mornings. About 1,300 people participated across the whole thing, and we had dialogue. What we tried for was participatory democracy and trying to get away from this polarized anarchy that we seem to have too many times, of getting people and providing the opportunity for them to sit down face to face, tables of 8. They were held at schools, community centers, senior centers, and a family-style dinner and talk with each other and listen to each other. And we compiled the results. And it gave people the opportunity to talk about what are the strengths of Rhode Island, what are the opportunities of Rhode Island, and what are the issues in their community.
And you know, this is a big project, just getting 20 locations and scheduling them, and you had weather issue right out of the box. I think your first one was, you know, in the snow belt of Woonsocket, the first possible day. What were you surprised about? We'll go to the results in a little bit, but what were you surprised at from who participated, what kind of turnouts you got, and what kind of communities, and was there any surprise about the quality of the conversation?
Yeah, so, you know, I think the whole thing was an experiment. We didn't know if it was going to work. And so I think, you know, the unexpected surprise was that it was successful. You didn't have to sign up in advance. It was open invitation for everybody. So we walked into every one of these sessions not knowing if we were going to get 5 people or 100 people. And we got, you know, as you said, the average was 60 to 80. We got anywhere from 22 out in Foster, Gloucester to 120 in one of the Providence sessions.
So you get all of Foster, Gloucester to attend, all 22 people. And what was the biggest one?
Providence. We had one of the Providence ones was 120. But the way that format was...
Had to be the east side one.
No, it wasn't. It was actually the south side.
Oh, was it?
The tables of 8 and sitting there talking with each other in groups meant that whether there were 3 tables or there were 23 tables, it really didn't make any difference. People were engaged. So I think one of the surprises was how positive and engaged people were, not necessarily about the topics, but just the opportunity. They really relished this opportunity to see each other one-on-one, and 99% of the people said in a survey that they met somebody new. So it wasn't just sitting with people and talking with people you knew. I used to go, and I went to all 20 of them, and the result was I heard a lot and I gained 5 pounds, but you could sit back, and what I did was listen. So I didn't hear screaming, and I didn't hear silence. And walking around to the tables, you saw that people could disagree, they could agree, they could debate, but it was done, again, face-to-face, over the meal, respectfully. And so the surprise was just the vibe, that people really appreciated it, liked the idea of seeing their friends and neighbors.
And let's go to the data. What does the data show? I mean, what's the learning that us as a media company can take away, or Governor Raimondo can take away, or Governor Fung, or Governor Trillo, or whomever takes over next? What is it that they can learn from this process?
So I think there's 2 categories. So I'll talk first the broader category of doing something like this. So 72% of the people that filled out the survey, and 1,000 out of the 1,300 actually completed the survey that you or I prepared for us. 72% said that they learned something about the issues in their community. So they heard something, they met somebody, there was communication about what was going on. And 75% said after going to Together RI, they were more likely to get involved. So I think the lesson that we can all learn, including our leaders, is getting people together and listening, not just talking at them, not just, you know, big ads, but listening to people is very powerful and giving them the opportunity to participate. And then it was very open about what are the categories and what are the issues. So some of the surprises or things that we just didn't know beforehand was the size of the state was noted by many people as a plus and as an opportunity, bordering on how come we can't get our act together in this little state where you and I, standing where we are now, in 45 minutes can get to every corner of this state and see people. Public education, so on the higher ed, we have these great institutions, let's leverage them. On the public education K through 12, let's improve them.
Yeah.
The natural resources we have, the opportunities to get around this state, good because there's a lot to see. On the challenge side was public transportation. There's a lot of places you can't get to. Government comes up, you know, we want good government, representative government, and I think the elected officials could listen to that. And community came up. People like to be together. They like to communicate with each other. They like to know the issues. We have great diversity in the state, and that came out in all forms or fashion about what's different around the state. So I think, you know, people can go to the RIF, Rhode Island Foundation.org website and see the report, or togetherri.org, and see this 100-page report has an executive summary. As I said, URI helped design the questionnaire for us, and they also collected all the table discussion notes. People took notes at the tables. And so whether it had sauce on it or not, we bundled it up and sent it down to URI. And they did a really good job of looking regionally. I don't have it all at the top of my head, but there were some things in northern Rhode Island different than in Newport County. But you know, we have more commonality as a state than we do differences.
Was there any one takeaway that you just completely did not anticipate on an issue, or the level of passion about an issue? You know, it's funny, we see real-time data. We see the number of people read something, how many times they share it, instantaneously. So we get this wonderful snapshot every day, continuously, about what people are engaging in. And oftentimes you're completely surprised.
Right.
And was there anything that you saw, touched, that you just went, wow, we need to think about that at the Rhode Island Foundation, about what we're doing to be able to meet that concern, demand, hope, whatever it might be?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what it reinforced for us was we're a community foundation. We're the state's community foundation. This was the ultimate in community.
Yeah.
So it really inspires us and implores us actually to get out there more. So to go out to the different parts of the state, to engage people in dialogue. We give a lot of money and a lot of grants, as people know, to nonprofit organizations. We don't always see the people on the other side of that. So one of the takeaways, the aha moments was, gee, we should do this more. So we're doing more community grants that are more grassroots. We're going to get out there more and make sure that we're seeing, we're listening, and we're hearing. And the other thing was the hunger that we saw, as I described. People just very positively and very passionately showed up and said, when's the next one? And we actually had a few people that came to 3 or 4 of them.
Oh my.
So the food was good, but it wasn't one that would inspire you to go all over the state. But what they wanted to see was what's going on. And there were 2 couples I remember, and I don't remember exactly where, at different times, were new to the state. And the feedback we got was, wow, this was a great way to learn what's going on in Rhode Island.
Was there any collection of viewpoints about a deep concern about the future or a condition within the state that needs, really, that it raised your awareness for an immediate action, where you said, oh God, maybe we need to put some more resources in that? Because you didn't have anecdotal information. This wasn't grandmother research. You know, 1,000 samples is a reasonable, sure, they're self-selecting, probably a little better educated, probably a little more affluent, but a good collection of folks from across the state.
Yeah, just to that point too, you can see the demographics in here. So we did get a representative group. You know, I'd say it was less young than not, just because on a Tuesday night it was tough to get away if you have little kids, but pretty representative. We had anywhere from a 6-month-old that came with her mother to a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor in Warwick. But I think it more than surprised, probably reinforced with public education, was really the need to improve and to take to the next level and to make sure all our kids everywhere across the state, no matter what their home life is, no matter where they're coming from, and then translating that into job training and job opportunities. So again, maybe more reinforced than AHA. The AHA one was more, hey, we're hungry, we're going to get more involved. But that one reinforced it for us.
We have a story today about the condition of Providence Public Schools today, and a collection of different, and it's some dark numbers. I mean, and there's not a lot of positive numbers. There's no place that we could find in any data source in which Providence was outperforming urban areas or anything else. And some of the numbers, 5% of proficiency in science and math and a couple grade levels, and really no improvement for years and years. SAT scores 100 points lower than the national average, and still 100 points less than the national average. Where is the where's the I don't know.
Urgency.
Yeah, where's the urgency and where's the disgust across the board from decision makers and taxpayers? We pay around $17,000 per pupil spending. It's at the top level in the United States of America, but our outcomes are at the bottom level, and our outcomes are even below our peer. You know, it goes back to Ted Eddy and Dan Challenger doing a study in the early 1990s when they looked at peer urban cities and found that Providence underperformed its exact peers. Similar, ESL population, similar number of new immigrants into the community. Where is, Joe Paolino says, Providence's problem is it's never had a mayor who's actually had a kid in the school system. I don't know if that's but there's just, you go out and talk to people, they care about speed cameras, and they care about potholes, and they care about crime, care about taxes. There's no passion, excitement, energy around education.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I read that this morning, and my first reaction when I read the list that you had was what you said. This isn't new. Even statewide, we have the highest Latino achievement gap in the United States for 5 years. Where's the urgency? Where's the action? We also, as you know, sit next to Massachusetts, which arguably has the best public education in the United States. And to that point, they started 25 years ago on a course, and they've stayed the course. We have not stayed the course even when we tried.
Democratic governors,
absolutely.
Republican
Who was in the legislature? It started under Governor Weld, and so we are in the next couple of months going to be starting an initiative on long-term planning for education, and we're going to look heavily at the Massachusetts model.
Can we do the short-term planning?
Well, yes. I mean, we need to know where we want to get to, and then push it along the way.
When I was a city councilman 25 years ago, we were talking about the long-term.
No, I know, but we don't put the stake in the ground. And what has to happen, I think, is that social will, economic will have to overcome the political will, and you have to have that groundswell.
A prominent young East Sider said to me the other day, he said, it's so depressing. I think his child is 2. He said some of his peers that live in their neighborhood, they have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and all the 4- and 5-year-olds, those parents are all, they're about to blow right out of the city and off to Barrington and East Greenwich. It just breaks down the communities, it breaks down the long term, and they'd rather run than fight because they don't see a pathway to success.
No, that's right. It's actually an economic development tool if you can have great schools, and so that's why you have people going over the border sometimes for the schools. But there's no good reason when we look at it why we cannot do what Massachusetts did. It's not that different. We're not benchmarking against California or New York City. It's right up the road. So we are going to work on that. We're going to get the people around the table. Everybody's got to be willing to take 80% to get 100%. You can't get everything. We can't keep doing it the same way. And to your point, while I'm saying we need a goal to get to, we then need to have the urgency and just get it done, because it's not fair to the kids.
I appreciate you coming on. Congratulations on Together RI. We'll be following up with you, and we'll get the links in today's piece out tomorrow, and so people can get an opportunity to go through that dig into it. If they've got questions or concerns, who should they talk to at Rhode Island Foundation?
You can email me, nsteinberg@rifoundation.org,
Great. We'll
and I will
embed that
answer
right in.
I will answer the email, no problem. But there's a lot of information that you can look at, some for curiosity, and some we hope people will take this information themselves. And you know, the them is us. People need to jump in and get engaged.
That's great. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock hour, I've got speaker Nick Mattiello, hot off primary day, here for a good half hour. We're going to talk about all the issues. And then Kate Nagel's got the 4 o'clock hour, jam-packed with a host of folks. Thanks everybody for tuning in here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Thank our friends over at Deepwater Wind. We'll see you tomorrow.